I mean, the biggest oil companies now in the world are all state-owned. There is no such thing as a free energy market in oil. And in the U.S., coal and oil both are plied with subsidies, with tax breaks, preferential regulations. I mean, there's a million different ways that we privilege fossil fuel in this country. The number one most salient being that we don't make them pay for the greenhouse gases that they spew up into the atmosphere, which is going to cost, multi-billions of dollars over the next, billions or even trillions of dollars over the next century. They don't pay for those. So it's not a free market if you're allowed to enjoy taxpayer subsidies, dump your waste up into the atmosphere, and not have to pay for your waste. That is, by definition, a horrifically distorted market. That's why coal and oil are still dominant, precisely because the market isn't free.
Now, we have bills pending in Congress right now. The House passed one version of an energy bill. The Senate passed a different version. Can you give us a lay of the land of what's in those bills and what are the prospects that this might move the ball forward in some way?
Sure. It's an interesting situation right now. The House passed what is a pretty good energy bill. The main thing the House bill has in it that was a big win is the renewable portfolio standard, which says...
That sounds boring.
Yeah, we desperately need a better name for that because it's actually it's a really easy to understand policy, and it's quite popular, I think, once people get what it is. But basically it just says we're going to set a benchmark. We want 15% of our power across the country to come from renewable resources. And this is an example of the sort of technology-neutral policy that I'm talking about. Just say we want 15% to come from non-fossil fuels. You figure out the best alternative, the best way to get there. We're just going to set the standard and let you guys figure it out. That was in the House bill, and that was a big fight, and it was a tough fight. So that's the good part of the House bill. The bad part of the House bill is that CAFE standards, automobile fuel efficiency standards,
the miles per gallon that the fleets of cars have to attain.
Right, exactly, which has been moribund for many years in this country.
And there's an SUV loophole on top of that.
Right. Got improvements in that got squashed by John Dingell, the representative from Big Auto, who
in Michigan
has been fighting those standards for years. So the House bill has renewable portfolio standard good, no CAFE standards bad.
And the Senate bill?
The Senate passed an entirely different bill, not a different version of the same bill, but basically their own energy bill, which has the flip side. It has an increase in CAFE standards, which is good, but the renewable portfolio standard got defeated in the Senate, mainly because
it's essentially a threat of filibuster.
Right. Mainly because senators from some states, primarily southern states, are worried that they don't have the renewable power resources that are going to allow them to meet this standard. So they're worried that they're going to end up buying renewable power from other states, and it's in effect going to suck money out of their economy and send it to other states.
Is that a fair concern on their part, or is that just a disingenuous excuse?
It's a fair concern. I mean, you get pretty quickly into the weeds of how the renewable portfolio standard is constructed. It matters quite a bit what counts as a renewable fuel. If you just stick to wind, say wind and solar and geothermal, then that's right. Southern states don't have a lot of that. But if you permit, say, energy efficiency or biomass or cogeneration, which is using the waste heat from other industrial processes to create electricity, all states have a lot of that stuff. So it depends on how you create your renewable standard, but I think the way it was written in the Senate, I think it is a legitimate concern for senators, but it could be tweaked. I think a lot of senators are just in the habit at this point of opposing that legislation because they always have. So both sides need to give a little bit. So anyway, it's going to be interesting to see how those bills get reconciled.
I've been seeing a problem not just with the energy bill, but also with children's health insurance and I believe even a veterans bill, where the Republicans in the Senate will prevent a House-Senate conference from even convening. And you can't get the House and Senate bills reconciled to put on the president's desk. Is that something that we have to worry about with this energy bill?
Well, yeah, there's several different worries. For one thing, Congress is going to be extremely busy this session. There's Iraq stuff coming up. There's the children's health insurance. There's this mortgage crisis going on. There's a lot on the plate, and even under the best case scenario, they're talking about appointing people for the conference committee that will, reconcile these two bills. They're talking about appointing people to that conference committee in late October. So, even under best case scenario, it's going to be tricky to do this very, very delicate work amidst all these other very pressing concerns. And then, of course, the Republicans in the Senate have been historically active, blocking or filibustering or threatening to filibuster everything that the Democratic-controlled Congress tries to pass. So, yes, it's entirely possible that they could prevent that. The Democrats are talking about sort of sneaking around the conference committee process entirely through some sort of parliamentary maneuver that I can't claim to
some sort of informal
fully
conference.
Understand. Right. Probably only Robert Byrd actually understands the mechanisms of it, but an informal conference to get around it. But, even putting Republican intransigence aside, it's just difficult. It's going to be difficult. There's a lot of very contentious issues, even among the Democrats, and it's going to be very delicate reconciling these two bills, even in an environment that wasn't full of other pressing priorities and, jackass Republicans and all the other obstacles in their way. It would be hard, even on its own terms. So, I think conventional wisdom is that it's going to be a miracle if a single comprehensive energy bill passes and is signed into law. That would require a series of miracles.
Well, we got about a couple minutes left. But before we wrap up, can you give us a sense, and on top of this energy legislation, there's global warming legislation in the pipeline, and can you crystallize what we can expect there and what individuals can do to both try to get this energy bill passed and get this global warming bill to be strong?
Well, I'd say what individuals can do is call their representatives and senators and say, I want the renewable portfolio standard and I want the CAFE standards raised. And whatever comes out of your conference committee better have the best of both bills rather than the worst of both bills in it. As to the cap and trade legislation,
that's one form of global warming, one way to combat global warming.
Right. Ultimately, I think the most important way. I think these bills are in the long perspective more important than the energy bill we're talking about. The capping and reducing our total carbon emissions is the number one most important thing we can do. Right now, there are several versions of this bill floating around with different targets, different strengths, different mechanisms, different ways of allocating the credits for emissions. The mechanisms are different. I think there's 5 different versions of cap and trade floating around.
We got about 30 seconds, so
floating around Congress right now. Here's what you can do: call your senator, call your representative, and say you support the Sanders-Boxer cap and trade bill. It's the toughest one. It's got the most stringent target. The mechanisms work best in that one. That's the clear progressive winner of a bill, Sanders-Boxer.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, David Roberts from Grist Magazine. Check out his blogging at grist.org, grist.org. This is Bill Scher. This has been the Liberal Oasis radio show on WHMP News, Information, and the Arts.